I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're tackling the urgent topic of environmental policy, climate change, and government reform. We're talking about a new powerful memoir called Gorilla in the Closet. It is written by a terrific author by the name of Frederic Eidsness. He is a former EPA insider, and he delivers a gripping history and bold critique of the agency's decline and what must be done to ensure a livable future. With firsthand experience and hard-hitting insight, he outlines a practical path forward to reboot our environmental protection systems before it's too late. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below the interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Eric, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thanks, Logan.
Gorilla in the Closet. It's a very, very interesting title, kind of a play on words, and there it is.
There it is. There's the gorilla.
Yeah, of like the elephant in the room.
Well, it's more than that. It's a metaphor for EPA's supposed oversight of all 50 states' environmental programs. EPA has abandoned that. States are on their own.
Why have they abandoned that? Have there been cuts to their budget? Tell us why they've been undermined.
Yeah, to set the stage, I'm going to say quite boldly right now, because everything else will flow from this, is that, for many Americans, we have already reached the tipping point on climate change. It's not a matter of if, it's here. And in the most obvious example of this are the flooding in Kentucky and along the Ohio River Basin that's going on today in the last several days. We've seen flooding in McAllen, Texas, and elsewhere, fires in California, fires everywhere. So as a practical matter, we've already gotten there. It's too late to think about it. We have to be bold and do something different. And that's where my book led me to understand that, this is really, it's too late. We have to completely shift the paradigm from a top down to a bottom up one. And what I mean by top down, when EPA was formed on January 1970, and I was there in the room, it was an agency which was supposed to follow a federalist system of governance. Now, federalism is, as you know, former power sharing among levels of government where each retains its own integrity. But EPA took the attitude that we're going to do everything from Washington. And that has rolled forward over 50 years where the environmental lobby, the people in the Beltway, control the debate. They have captured EPA. They captured the Democratic Party, thinking they can solve all these problems from Washington, from the top down, with either regulation or money. It fails.
How long have we been in decline when it comes to the EPA? I mean, obviously, this current administration probably isn't as devoted to it as past administrations, but these guys just got into power a couple of months ago. This has been an ongoing thing, right?
It's certainly been an ongoing thing. It's largely due to the structure of EPA and the nature of people like me, political hacks that serve at the pleasure of the president with a confirmation of the Senate. We're there for a few years and we're gone. EPA cannot sustain a durable focus. And hubris is the biggest bane of our existence. Every time a new crowd comes in, whether it's under Reagan, in my case, or Trump, there's this hubris. We just think everything that was done before us was all wrong, and we have our own agenda. So there's no continuity, and you can't control and regulate or manage our natural environment or the pollution that enters into it from over 880,000 direct discharges with a one-size-fits-all approach. It top down just does not work.
You've got some ideas. You have an initiative. Tell us about that.
Well, here it is. Rather than continue to focus on EPA's power in Washington, EPA needs to be abolished in its current form and redefined as a commission, a truly independent commission. EPA has never been independent of the White House. It's a political animal. And by putting it into a commission structure, you're going to get less interference from the White House. That doesn't mean the White House won't have a major role. It will. And EPA will have a major role. And EPA needs to be reorganized to reflect more of a federalist approach. a flatter organization where rather than 10 regional offices, which operate completely independently of headquarters with people who are probably often not qualified for only 2 or 3 years, we need to have 50 state offices co-located with the governors and with the environmental programs of every state in the nation. And what will happen, because EPA experimented with this back when I was there, it turns out that this flattens the curve, it improves communication, and the EPA top people that are co-located with states are advocates for the states. And so the messages get through, and we can have a more flexible approach, but still pursue a goal over a long period of time, not have it change every 2 to 3 years.
And some of the states do a great job. I know, like New Jersey, for example, has a very strong DEP that investigates environmental problems and enforces environmental law. But I'd imagine that is different from state to state, right?
It is, and New York is always, New York, New Jersey have always been strong. The red states, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, have been very weak. Texas is very weak relative to some of the other states. But the real key here is if states are put front and center, and local governments, to drive the policy rather than EPA. EPA can still regulate technology standards for permits. But if states can take the forefront on this, that is more of a federalist model that the environmental laws talk for. The Clean Water Act says it is the primary right and responsibility of states to protect, preserve, and enhance the quality of our nation's waters. The next 100 pages is a roadmap for how EPA was going to do that. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
So what I'm proposing is very simple. We're going to fund a planning process at the local levels, city and county government. We're going to invert the pyramid from this to this, and all the resources and technical assistance and know-how of the federal and state governments are directed at local people and local general purpose governments, city and counties, the only ones that have real land use and police power that the federal government doesn't have. You can't control fires, you can't control flooding if you don't have the land use power. And so this is a direct assault on those things, and I think giving them time and technical resources and funding to get started, because no local government has extra money laying around to start new planning processes, then that's the way to go. There's an example of this that was done under the Clean Water Act right in the county, the 6,000 square mile county that I'm sitting in, 2 counties, was a regional water quality planning program in the mid-70s. There were 150 of them that were funded. The one here is the only one that's still ongoing. The rest collapsed completely. But this has been funded by city and county governments and industry who realize the value of the power of sitting at the table with the state and federal government. So we'd replicate what we did here. And there's only really 3 criteria that have to, or 3 or 4 criteria to get a plan. You've got to involve the public, and it's got to become kitchen table conversation for them. And they've got to view that this is something that's practical, that's affordable, that's relevant to their lives, and meets local values. And that's the strength of federalism. That's the only reason our country has held together, because this diverse country with all the different ethnic and cultural differences can all be normalized by having local governments express their views through their people who vote and hold them directly accountable at the polls to create a plan that can work. But they need a lot of help.
Let's give the folks at home an overview of the book. Tell them what they'll find within the covers.
Pretty simple. It explains the formation of EPA, why it went wrong, and how it went wrong. And it has. It's a grossly mismanaged agency. The first EPA administrator, very famously known, William Ruckelshaus, was a lawyer. He didn't understand organizational management. He never did anything that was actually pushed through the 10 regions in the 50 states because he didn't understand it. So it was very ad hoc, and that's pretty much the model that we've had with EPA, not only the ad hocism of individuals like me, but also just the fact that we come and go every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And then, but the rest of the book focuses on what you can do about it. How do you change the paradigm to something that's more effective, that people can get behind and understand? And I, naturally, as a former Reagan Republican, I'm an independent now. I certainly believe in federalism because I think that's how we get better decisions. And so we're upending, the book talks about upending this hierarchical top-down approach to a bottom-up. And the best way to think about this, if you go to a football game with a pair of binoculars, the federal government deludes itself into thinking, and by the way, the Democratic Party, thinking that they know the answers to everything. They just think they got all the answers. But they don't know what the question is, because if you take binoculars and you zoom in on a play, you can see the quarterback actually speaking the play. Right. But what you can't see is how the play's developing, what's happening on the left and the right and the bottom and the top. But you zoom back, you get the bigger picture. Well, they think they can understand the world from Washington, and they can't. They're looking through a long lens with a very narrow field of vision. So we're going to pull that lens back and put the focus on local governments and this local planning with a lot of help. And the detail is in the book. And I actually proposed legislation to how to do this. Actually words written that ordinary people can understand.
Exactly. Let me just ask you this question, because it's in the minds of viewers, I'm sure. What about China and India? You go into those countries and you're choking on the air as soon as you step off the plane. Can we do enough to prevent or protect the environment by just having initiatives here when you've got like massive producing countries like China that are literal sewers?
Well, this is a great topic, and we could spend hours on this. But I think historically, up until now, the EPA, notwithstanding its faults, and the American government has had the strongest environmental protection programs. What we have to recognize, they're failing, and why. And my book explains how this rebooting and this reorganization of EPA was going to change all that. And most countries have followed our lead, but the reality of it is we are not good stewards of our environment. We just are not. Yeah. And we can't stick with one game plan. We keep changing the rules all the time. And I think that, we're going to have credibility nationally. And I hate to say it, but this tariff issue is going to complicate that. Mm-hmm. The things we're doing, the bungling and mungling of the new administration of trying to, change the world order is not going to help us deal in the environmental field. We'll pull back out of the climate change agreement, the climate accords, the Paris Accords, again, if we haven't already. Trump took us out of them the first time. That entity is not a solution, but it's a forum to debate these issues. And what we have to do is, wealthy countries have to subsidize underdeveloped countries to do better than we did when we weren't thinking about the land use impacts of the future on the environment, and nobody ever heard of climate change until 20 years ago. So it's a mixed bag. It's not a happy picture. I think the takeaway from here is, if we don't think big and think out of the box and get away from this environmental lobbyist controlled top-down governance modeling in this country, we will not be prepared. We are not prepared. And the irony is, to give Trump's new EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, who I don't know from Adam, but I did send the book to, and he probably never got it or read it, but they are at least trying to return to federalism. And one of the things they're doing is they're going to let the states decide what's the best way to control coal ash, the coal that's created from coal-fired power plants, because they're laying around in lagoons and underground and reused for road work and everything all over the place, but they contain a lot of contaminants. The old system would have been EPA would write all the details, and they'd think of every potential problem and put it in a regulation, and there would be a lot of no's. And Zeldin, I think, is going to go back to the more federalist model. Here, the main criteria, like permitting, like reporting, like monitoring, and here's the technology standard we want you to use, or standards. You figure out the best way to do it under your rules. That would never happen under a Biden or a Democratic administration. We'll see how it works. I can't believe Zeldin wants to be known as the man that dismantled EPA. I don't think anybody that gets that job is going to want to carry that moniker for the rest of his life. So I'm going to be hopeful and work with this guy.
Absolutely. We will keep our fingers crossed. Your book is a wake-up call for action. It is called Gorilla in the Closet. In it, Eric, a former EPA insider, delivers a gripping history and bold critique of the agency's decline and what must be done to ensure a livable
Got it.
future.
Got it.
With firsthand experience and hard-hitting insight, he outlines a practical path forward to reboot our environmental protection systems before it's too late. And we are this close to being too late, so action is needed now.
And Logan, you can buy it on Amazon at $9.95 on the ebook version. It's a great read, but the big book is a doorstop. So we have to, if you get to the ebook, it's very easy to read. It has a search engine. You can look up names and people and places, and it's an encyclopedia in the industry. So go to Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble. It's $9.95 in the ebook version.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining me here today, Eric.
Thanks, Logan.
I appreciate your time and your insight. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.